Hey, Dustin here, Smoking Eagles Rod Shop, back with another video for you. Now, today we're going to be working on my Edelbrock B4-B intake I bought for my big block Buick here. And yeah, I can bolt it right on the engine, and it would perform well, but I think there's horsepower left, and I'm not going to leave anything on the table because, let's be honest, nobody likes leftovers. Ha! Little dad joke for you there. Now, remember guys, the things I'm going to show you in this video don't just pertain to my intake here. You could use them on your daily driver, a cast iron intake. You could use them on your lawnmower or your dirt bike. There's no limit to what you can do if you just add a little sweat equity to your project and yeah, get your hands dirty. So I'm going to quit yakking and let's get on it. All right, on the bottom side here, guys, we've got all of our intake ports that go directly into our head, carries our air fuel straight into the horsepower machine. And we've also got our water jackets. Now, you can see all these inconsistencies down in here where it's just rough cast, especially like in the side of here and down in here, there's nicks and stuff. Now, all that stuff is robbing horsepower because it's screwing your flow up and disrupting your air fuel mixture, atomization, whatever you want to call it. I'm not Bill Nye the Science Guy. I'm just telling you what I know. So any of that stuff you can clean up is good. One thing you really need to watch for is anywhere where they've drilled and tapped into either a vacuum port or like this water jacket over here. There's burrs and stuff on the bottom sides of that stuff, and that's going to disrupt flow, but it also may drop some metal shavings down into your engine or something. So you really want to check all that stuff. Look up in there, blow this thing out real good with your air compressor, or rinse it out with, I don't know, mineral spirits or whatever you want to use to clean it all out. Just make sure there isn't any debris in there that you're just going to bolt this thing on your engine and suck it straight down into your freaking heads. That would be disastrous. Now, I am going to gasket match this. My heads have already been ported, so I'm going to grab the gasket. We'll slap it on here. I'll show you guys how to do that. This is our exhaust crossover. We don't need that for this application, but hey, if you got an old street rod or hot rod or whatever you're working on and it's chilly where you are, like maybe you work day shift and you want to drive your car to work a couple times a week and it's 50, 60 degrees out when you start your car in the morning, you may want to use this exhaust crossover because it'll help your choke and your carburetor operate a little bit better on those cool mornings. But, you know, for what we're doing, all we care about is go fast, so we're not using any of that crap. Let me get that gasket out and I'll show you what we got. So what I've done is I've put bolts through here, our intake bolts. I hunted down nuts and washers, and everything is hand tight or loose. Everything kind of can move around a little bit. It's just barely snugged on there, just enough that I can line everything up and really get a good idea of how this gasket lines up with this intake. Now, these valley pan gaskets have these little notches, and when you bend them and pop them into your engine, they line right up. These hold your head, and you can line your ports up really good and all your bolt holes and then set your intake on top. So all I've done here is I've centered this up the best I possibly can as far as with my intake ports, because those matter the most, and my water jackets. Nothing else really matters too much. You just want to make sure you have your gaskets actually going to seal around your intake. This one here, it's pretty high on this bottom edge. I really wish it would go back just a little bit, but it really just doesn't have that much room. You can see it doesn't line up real good here, and it's off even more over here. But there isn't really much I can do about that. I've got it pulled up as far as it'll go. Pull it up about that far, but now my bolt hole's way off. That's about as good as she can get there, guys. About like that. So I'm going to get the maximum amount of gasket flow there. So, got everything centered up. Now all we got to do is grab our Sharpie and mark all these ports. Now all I'm going to do is just trace around here. Right like so. It's that simple. Now I'm going to transfer my bolts over to the other side of the intake and do the other side, and I'll meet you guys back here. All right, guys, so I got the intake all ported. It's 100 times better than it was. Now, You could smooth these out because smoother is better, but time is of the essence and I don't really have time. So we're gonna call it good enough. It's way better than it was from the factory. This thing's gonna flow really good. It's gonna be gasket matched and matched to our heads. And yeah, looks really good. You can see way up inside there. I did a really good job on that, cleaning all the flashing out and manufacturing stuff out of this thing. I went way down in there as far as I could reach, which is quite a ways. Got everything all smoothed out. I even did in the top of here, kind of smoothed all this stuff out. You know, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. I've got these two holes here that I need to plug off on both sides, and I got these cool little bolts. Let me go grab them. All right, guys, so I got one that screws in far enough, and the rest of them stick out about that much. So I've got this cool little, I don't know, brass fitting that I found that they screw into, and these holes are really deep, and I never plan on taking them out. So I'm just gonna go over on the old belt sander and the grinder and grind them down until they'll fit flush or just below flush, and we'll call that good. So this is gonna take a while, but I'm gonna get to it. So I got those all to fit. I had to grind them down quite a ways, but you know, top surface don't matter. Grind her down and then make her fit. That fits pretty good. Now I can put a straight edge across there and double check, but they're obviously below the surface. So that's just gonna block off our exhaust crossovers. And now we can toss this intake in here. One thing I do need to do though, is I need to toss some oil on top of these lifters before I close this up. That way when we put our new push rods in here and our rockers and all that stuff on the top here, that'll all be ready for break-in. To do that, I've just got a little oiling can with my break-in oil in it, which makes things really simple. Just like that. So we're ready to toss the intake on there. I've got this surface all cleaned up nice and neat. We've got this all radiused in and gasket and port matched to our heads on both sides. Everything looks good. Everything's nice and clean. Now I'll flip this over and show you what we got over here. Now on this side, I've plugged off everything I'm not going to use. I've got a bung here. I've got a plug there, plug there. We're not going to be using this EGR hole in the back, so I threaded it, and then I found this fitting. I screwed down in there and put a plug in the center. These threads, this hole's actually 1 inch, and I tapped it with a 3/4 MPT pipe tap, and it's actually just the hole's a little too big, so there aren't a whole lot of threads there. It just barely snugs up, so that's why I use this fitting here that has the square head so that there's no way it could possibly fall down through. And then I snugged it down and I put a little bit of Permatex on my threads and then tightened her down in there, snugged it up. And then I've got this Allen plug to plug that off. This is for our transmission line. This is for our brakes. Yeah, it's pretty much ready to go in. I've got our thermostat on here and ready to rock. I also clear coated this with just some engine clear. So hopefully it stays kind of shiny for a while. It's time to toss it on the old engine over there. Now, I recommend you take an engine plate, get you a couple of bolts, and bolt it right down on here. Now that's gonna help you out in a couple of different ways. On this aluminum intake, not so much because of weight, because it doesn't weigh that much, but like the stock cast iron intake on old Carmen Electra, it weighed as much as the damn car did. And you could use this, I used this plate many a times, lifted it up with the old engine hoist, slide it over, set her down on there. If you want to do it the old school way and just pick the intake up and set it down on there, you're probably going to have to call a friend. And yeah, if you want to know how I know, go back to the Stage 1 455 video, the first one, when I said, I'm too lazy to grab my engine hoist, I'll just lift this intake out of here. And yeah, I regretted that to this day. So, yeah, guys, I'm going to bolt this down, snug it up. It's also going to protect me from dropping anything down in the intake that's going to land inside the heads, because the last thing we need is that, especially like 3 days from Cletus and Cars, because I'm going to be honest, I'm cutting her awful damn close. I'm going to get our intake out. I'll show you how to do that. We'll toss this intake on there. We'll get her all torqued down. So I wiped off the bottom of the intake with rubbing alcohol here. Highly recommend it. I got all our bolts dug out that we're gonna need, and I've got our new Valley Pan intake gasket. I recommend always use a Valley Pan gasket. Don't use the paper ones that just go on the side, because this Valley Pan is designed from the factory to do a couple of things. Now, first thing it's gonna do when you set it down in there, it protects the bottom of the intake right here from oil splashing up and baking on there and creating a bunch of carbon buildup in your engine that you don't need. Also, it keeps hot oil from bouncing off the bottom of your intake and helps keep your intake cooler, which cool fuel burns with makes more horsepower than hot fuel. Everybody knows that. So I also wipe this down with a little bit of rubbing alcohol on both sides. The other thing that this does is when it's down in there, this bends down like this, kind of concave down into the top of the head. So if you think about it, it's actually sitting about right here. And what that's doing is any oil that bounces up, it's hitting there, or any oil that bounces over this way, it's hitting there, and it's running down and it's dripping directly down on your camshaft. If you've got this intake as the bottom, now you've got oil dripping off of all these cracks and crevices and stuff up here, and it's not really aimed directly at anything. But with this Valley Pan gasket, it's bent down and concave. It's created that way from the factory on purpose with this rib right down the center, because the oil is going to run down and it's going to drip right off of the center of that, and it's going to lube that cam up. And if you guys know anything about cams nowadays, everybody tells you all the horror stories of cams getting wiped out and these new cams ain't worth the crap and blah, 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 blah. Well, if you've changed 27 things that the engineers designed to keep these things alive, no wonder they're going to die. So just give your cam the best chance of life that you possibly can. Use the right gaskets, use the right tools. So, like I said, I wiped this down with alcohol. I've got a little bit of RTV. I've got our instructions here from Edelbrock for our intake there. It wants me to torque it down just like the book wants me to torque down the cast iron intake. And it wants me to do 2 segments to 25 foot-pounds. Now, the stock cast iron intake says 65 foot-pounds for a 455 big block. So I'm obviously not going to go to 65 foot-pounds, but I'm going to go to 25 in 2 increments like this says, and then I'm going to give her the old good luck bump just to make sure she's nice and snug. You also want to take a little bit of RTV. It tells you to apply 1/4 inch bead across the block end surfaces, which everybody knows that. You get those rubber gaskets that are supposed to go across the front and back china wall here, and they suck. They always leak. So best thing to do is essentially use this entire tube, put half of it across the front, half of it across the back, and then get another tube to do the sides. So we'll do that. We'll get that all hooked up and ready to rock and roll. Yeah, other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory. These gaskets are real nice. They've got this little lip right here. So what I like to do is I like to put my Permatex on the bottom side here, across on both sides, just around the pockets. You don't need a whole lot because you don't want it oozing in there and getting sucked into your motor, or, you know, creating less horsepower by blocking off the flow of fuel. So just a real light coating around all your ports, just to help the gasket seal a little bit. Then I flip it over, I stick it down in the engine, and when you fold this thing in the center, they've got it notched here, and they've got it notched down here. You fold it in the center, and these little punched out spots, they actually clip right on here, and they hold the bolt holes lined up perfectly for you, so you can just set your intake right down on there. Once I get it down in there, I'll put my Permatex on the top side, just a thin coat on each side. Then we'll set our intake right down on there, the old controlled descent. We've got a locator pin on this and a locator back there. These Buicks are pretty nice because they got these locator pins. Some GM stuff doesn't have the dowel pins to locate your intake. They've just got like this little pinhole here for those junk rubber gaskets that you throw away. If you don't know what those look like because you've never seen them, because everybody's throwing them away, I'll show you what one looks like. It looks like this. You can see they got that little hole there. It's supposed to go around your dowel pin or whatever. Yeah, take these, throw them away. All right, I'm gonna toss you up on the time lapse and we'll knock this intake out. But like I said, just be easy on the Permatex. don't be the Permatex guy. So I got this all good to go. Like I said, just a thin coat of Permatex on there to help the gasket out, guys. And now I'll show you how this clips in there. Just bend that baby right there. I like to put one side in first if I can. Get my holes to line up. Then you can just clip it right down in there like that. Now you can see it's holding itself in there. All the holes are all lined up nice and neat. So I'm gonna grab my tube of Permatex. I'm gonna straddle the old A-arm there. I'm gonna put my coat on this side. I'll do the China wall, and then we'll be able to set the old intake right down in there. So like Edelbrock said, we went around it twice, took it to 15 foot-pounds, then down to 25 foot-pounds, and then I put it on 26 and gave her the extra little good luck bump there, you know, take it to 11. And yeah, cleaned up the Permatex on the front and the back of the block just so we know we don't have any oil leaks there. I hope you guys really enjoyed this stage 1 intake upgrade. You could do it on a engine that's not stage 1, it doesn't really matter, it's just an Edelbrock intake there. But anyway guys, I will post some other videos around my melon here, videos we're doing in the shop, so make sure you go check those out. Really stoked on this stage 1 build and what we're going to get out of this thing in the burnout pit. I've got less than 7 days to get this thing to Indy for Cletus and Cars 2024. So wish me luck. Bright and early tomorrow morning, I'm going to start tossing everything back on the top of this intake so we can break this cam in. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. I want to personally thank every single one of you for watching my videos and liking, sharing, and subscribing. The channel's growing. It's super awesome. I'm stoked. Can't wait to see where we go with this. Till next time, keep on wrenching. Peace.